Welcome back. You're watching Global Eye. Red carpet was rolled, trade agreements were signed, and a sweeping joint statement was made by Russia and Chinese presidents on their consensus on a host of geopolitical and trade issues. Vladimir Putin's two-day state visit to China was a striking show of alignment between the two countries. The two leaders have pledged to deepen strategic partnership in the backdrop of ongoing Ukraine conflict and US hitting China with fresh tariffs. You cannot have it both ways. White House issued a warning to China, saying it can't expect closer ties with Europe and also engage with those threatening Europe's security. Putin and Jinping exchanged handshakes and a rare hug in the capital, Beijing. The video of the two leaders hugging each other is also widely being shared on social media. Let's decode the optics of this visit with Ambassador DB Venkatesh Varma, former Indian ambassador to Russia. Ambassador Varma, thank you very much for joining us on the program. How do you read the body language this time around? Before the war began, both leaders had said that this partnership knows no limits. But do you think there are constraints and certain cracks in the relationship now?
Well, President Putin's visit to China soon after his inauguration, I think is symbolically important. Of course, the proximate reason was the 75th anniversary celebrations of establishment of diplomatic relations. But President Putin is also returning a favor of President Xi when President Xi visited Russia soon after assuming the office for the third time. So there is a personal chemistry there, and it's quite extraordinary for President Xi to initiate a hug. He's never done that with other leaders before. Going beyond the optics, I think Russia and China have been moving closer together. The political alignment is very close. They are not allies. But definitely the economic relationship has reached a plateau. There have been no major announcements on the economic side, especially in the energy sector. I think this goes to prove that the earlier statement that this was a relationship with no limits was obviously an exaggeration. The real world is very different, both for Russia and China. Russia is with its back against the wall in Europe. It has a continuing war in Ukraine, though it is prevailing, but there is no early chance of success on the battlefield, though it is gaining the upper hand. For China, the conflict in Europe is not the same conflict it faces elsewhere with the United States. Russia is totally now cut off from the West, from Europe and the United States. China has a conflictual but a deepening engagement both with Europe and a conflictual engagement with the United States. So President Xi and President Putin are differently placed, but they see a common driver, a common interest in working together on certain specific issues, though their ability to deliver on each other's interests is not the same. It is,
right.
But it is quite an extraordinary visit and a very important global development.
Ambassador Varma, what I'd also like to ask you, that would China like to be seen as the only country in the world bankrolling Putin's war? Because they are also coming under the West, are coming under pressure from the West for sanctions. Is that a worry in China that they will face sanctions if they keep supporting Russia?
See, geopolitically, China has had a good 2 years in the last 2 years since the commencement of the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia, as I said, is on the back foot in Europe, fighting the Ukraine war. The United States is an overextended global power. So China can pick and choose how it plays Russia on one hand and how it plays Europe and the United States on the other hand. You would recall President Xi was in Europe on a European tour. The United States has initiated a number of tariffs, which almost amount to sanctions on certain sectors of the Chinese economy. But the Chinese ability to negotiate with the West is far stronger than the Russian ability to influence Western decision-making, unless, of course, it prevails decisively on the battlefield in Ukraine. And that has not yet happened, though it is, as I said, gaining the upper hand. So to say that Russia and China have similar interests, I think is misplaced. China has placed it very carefully. It has benefited from discounted oil and energy commodity exports from Russia. It has benefited from the supply of dual-use items, but it has been careful in its banking relations with Russia. It has also been very careful in supplying lethal arms to Russia, because it definitely needs to maintain a balance between its relations with Russia and with the West. Whatever it is, China has all the cards in its favor rather than with Russia or with the United States. So that is something that we need to note for our own calculations going forward.
Right. Ambassador Varma, there was a 7,000-word joint statement by the two leaders. What were the key economic and military takeaways, according to you? Or do you feel Putin did not go back with as many wins as he may have wanted to?
Well, the 7,000-word document can be summarized in 2 points. It is an extraordinary testament against Western domination as perceived by Russia and China. It is also offers not a complete view, but an alternative view of how the international system should be run. And the main point that both Russia and China are united about, they have a common position on that, which is the establishment of a multipolar world, which is a code word for diluting American power, American and European power on global affairs. It is not just in military and political terms, it is also multipolarity in cultural and civilizational terms. So the split that they see more from Russia than from China with the West is fairly substantive and fairly deep. Having said that, again, the ability of Russia and China to deliver on the joint statement is not the same. They are different powers with different interests. They are also powers with different capabilities and ability to influence the international system. But one particular point I think is very clear. The United States intends to take on Russia and China as part of what is called dual containment. This summit in Beijing formalizes Russian and Chinese intention to take on the dual containment of the United States. Now, this is a completing of the circle of the process that began in 1971 with the Nixon-Kissinger visits to China, where the United States aligned with China to take on the then Soviet Union. And today, Russia and China are aligning themselves, though they are not military allies, on taking on the United States. Of course, their answer is that they are only responding to what the United States intends to do. And that, of course, will have grave implications for our own Indo-Pacific strategy.
Right. And what would be your view in terms of how India should see this situation unfolding after the elections? Once the new government is sworn in, what will be the challenge that they are going to face?
Well, the world is in considerable upheaval and turmoil. The old formulae and old frameworks are breaking apart. So there's a lot of flux. The new government in June will have to hit the road running. I think that India is extremely well placed. Our diplomatic record of dealing with the international crises and conflict in the last 2 years has been of a very high standard. We have stable political leadership. We have a strong economic fundamentals. We are willing to engage with a broad spectrum of players. We've seen that in the G20 summit. There are a number of important meetings coming up. There is, of course, the BRICS summit, the SEO summit, the G20. Prime Minister has been invited to attend the G7 summit. There is a Swiss peace conference coming up in mid-June. And going forward, I think India will be required to show diplomatic flexibility, but also pragmatism in dealing with a very troubled world. India's credentials are very good, but these need to be backed up with credible power. And going forward, I think both economic engagement, trade engagement, energy engagement, not just by us, by the government, but also by our companies dealing with international crises, going forward, I think is hugely important. We cannot afford to be passive recipients of global forces. We need to reach out into the very troubled world to see how we can shape political processes, how we can shape markets, how we can shape technology linkages and supply chains. So I think the diplomatic agenda is full, but I'm very confident that India will put its best foot forward.
Right. Ambassador Varma, thank you very much for joining us, summing up the Russia-China meeting for us, the significance and also the challenges and what's on the plate for India once the elections are over. Thank you once again for being with us. That's all we have time for on Global Eye. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.